I think everything looks pretty good. Sweet. All right. It's really weird listening to myself. All right, guys, welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk about the GFX 50S, this monster of a camera. Honestly, I want to go through some of the pros and some of the cons, and I'll talk about the lens that I have on here as well, the Mitakon 65mm 1.4. I'll also use the 45mm 2.8 for the GFX system, and it's really nice too, but I'll talk about that in another video. So some of the pros to me are just like any other Fuji camera for the most part, the tactility of it and the dials and everything. Everything just clicks very well, and it feels like a tank. It's built very well. I mean, this thing has to be about 7 pounds with this lens on here. It's massive. So the feel, it feels like it was made for the military. Honestly, it's gigantic. So for a lot of people, weather sealing is a big deal. It is for me. I get out in the elements, and I actually photographed somebody today in the rain. So weather sealing on this camera is great. I haven't had a problem with it so far, thankfully. As long as you have weather sealed lenses, that is kind of how that works. The battery life to me is good. It's not excellent by any means. I'm not gonna say it's the best battery of all time, but it is good enough for me. If I was shooting a wedding, probably 1.5 batteries. It depends on how you shoot. It does have a tilt screen, which is great, especially on a camera of this size. And it's just like the older XT1 and XT2. So I like that a lot, and I like the fact that you can tilt the screen, get down low, and shoot like that instead of having to lay down and army crawl to get your shot. Another thing is the viewfinder actually comes off, which is kind of cool. I don't know why you would do that, other than the fact that you could obviously shoot from the hip, and I guess it kind of gives you that top-down view, kind of like the old medium formats. You can also get different viewfinders for this camera, one that actually tilts up so you can look down just like a top-down. So it's really cool. Yeah. Overall, though, the image quality is what you're buying this camera for, and the size of the sensor, and it just makes the most beautiful images in my opinion. I've shot with so many cameras. I have not shot with a Phase 1 or a Hasselblad, but I would like to. I just haven't. So this camera is the closest thing in my range that I could obtain. So this is it's just great, really. So on to the cons list. It's not the slowest camera I've used by any means, but it's really slow considering it's 2022. This is obviously an old camera, and if you know how to shoot right, it's not that big of a deal. I shot on a 5D Mark III for years, and I used spot focus, never used continuous focus, and it just works for me, and that's how I've shot ever since then. So it is kind of a drag, but at the same time, if you're using this camera, you're probably not shooting sports or fast moving subjects. So it is a bit slow on the autofocus side, but to me, the image quality beats that, so it's worth it. It does have a screen blackout, so whenever you take a photo, it takes just a second for the screen to come back. The shutter sound on it is actually really cool. That would be a pro as well. Another thing, and this is really funny, I'll show you an image. It extends to 16,000 when you use the electronic shutter, which is fantastic unless you move an inch. Like, you cannot move at all, or you'll get rolling shutter, which is the worst. And I'll show you some images right now that I had to deal with that. And the bad thing is you have the blackout, so you're not getting a preview of the image, or that's how I have it set up anyway, so I didn't realize it until after the photo shoot. Luckily, I did get the images while I was staying still, because I'm really bad about shooting and then moving. So yeah, that's something to look out for on this. This camera doesn't have strap loops. Instead, it has these weird little hook things, and you have to order specific straps for this. The camera comes with one, and I don't like that. And I'm sure there's a way around it. I just don't know what it is. So that's just a weird thing. I'm sure other large medium format cameras probably have the same thing, because they're so heavy they need some type of reinforcement. but it's just annoying that I can't use a strap that I have. So, con. The weight of it is, I like it and then I dislike it, because if you're carrying it around all day, I mean, it's gonna pull on your back and then you're gonna hurt after. So yeah, the weight is substantial, especially if you have a large lens like the Mitakon 65-1.4. It's massive. Another thing is it's very noticeable. So this is, like I said, not a small camera whatsoever. So I feel like if you just walk around with it, people notice that you have it looks expensive. And that's not my favorite thing. I'm more of an X100V kind of guy. And it beside this just looks like a toy, which I mean, it looks like a toy already, but this just looks expensive. And that's, if you're walking around the street and you're in a sketchy area, probably not the best idea. So those are all the cons and the pros. And I think the pros outweigh the cons. Little things like weight and autofocus, I can understand that kind of pushing you away, but the sensor on it is the same as the 50S2, so I couldn't justify going to that. I'm sure that the autofocus is a bit faster, but if it has the same sensor and I'm using a manual focus lens, to me, it doesn't really matter. So I think it was totally worth it, and the freaking image quality is outstanding. I want to talk about this lens a bit. Also, obviously, it's a beautiful lens. It's, like I said before, huge. So I'm going to go over the pros and cons of this lens. And to start that list, pro number one, it is sharp, surprisingly sharp, especially in the center, but I'll also recompose. So I'll have my subject in the center, I'll manual focus and then recompose however I want to. And I've actually had some really good images come out of that. So it's surprisingly sharp to be a third-party inexpensive lens, considering it's for a medium format. The depth of field is insane. That's why I wanted this system, is to get that medium format look, and I didn't really get it with the 45 2.8, but with this 100%, it looks like my Mamiya RZ67 Pro 2, and it just blows me away. So yeah, this is the lens for this camera, in my opinion. 50mm-ish equivalent, and a 1.4 equates to, I don't know, like a 1.0. I don't know what it is. You'll have to look it up. I don't know. I'm not a nerd. The build quality is insane. It's like a tank. It fits this camera so well. I feel like if you were to buy this camera with this lens, I mean, it looks like it should just come with this lens, to be honest. It just fits it so well. It's really amazing. So the build quality, the resistance in the ring, the focus ring, is really nice too. It just feels really good. I wish it had a clicked aperture, but it's declicked, unfortunately, and I hate that. I'm shooting wide open for the most part just to get that look. And another thing I love about it is the characteristics, like the flares. The flares are awesome. Huge advocate of any kind of characteristic that just looks different. So uniqueness is something that this lens has. And yes, dude, I love that about this lens. And the colors are fantastic too. They're warm with a little green, but after you get done with the image and you run it through your editing process, they just look so dang good. All right, so the cons for this lens is it is heavy. So that, I think that's not a bad thing. I think for some people it would be. So I just want to say that it is heavy because it is. And if you don't want something heavy, you definitely do not want this. So heavy is a con depending on the person. Obviously, it's a manual focus lens. Some people don't like that. It doesn't really bother me that much. The way I shoot though, I do kind of shoot snappy autofocus, especially if I'm using like the X-T4 or a Sony. But for this type of system, I kind of replaced my film camera with this, so I kind of knew what I was getting myself into whenever I got rid of my Mamiya RZ67 Pro 2. The focus throw on this is pretty substantial, which I understand considering it's a 1.4 on a medium format. You want to be able to get that very precise focus. So like just it just goes so far. I don't know what the degree is, but I mean, you see my hand goes all the way around. But obviously, if you have a subject that's 10 feet away, you're not going to change it very much from that. You're just going to be there. But it is a long focus throw, which isn't that big of a deal for me. I feel like we needed more cons. One more thing. So this kind of goes back to the camera's inability to shoot fast shutter speeds. So if you're using this outside and it's super bright at 1.4, it's almost too bright for it. Even if you're maxed out in your shutter speed and your ISO is very low, at 4,000 you have to switch over to electronic shutter, and then you'll get roll-in shutter, or you'd have to put an ND filter on it. I haven't really had a problem with it, but it was very close. It was on the line for me to have to do one of those two things. I just wanted to try the electronic shutter to see how bad that roll-in shutter was going to be, and it was pretty bad. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think, and I'm going to leave a link for this lens in the description below. And also make sure you follow me over on Instagram at HunterHeartPhoto. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.